Thank you so much. A little bit more of the Hoffmitz Milken Center for Typography, just to give you context of FEMINAE, Typographic Voices of Women by Women. It is a freestanding center at ArtCenter College of Design. And FEMINAE, Typographic Voices of Women by Women, came about, here we are, now you know where I'm coming from. This is the Hoffmitz Milken Center for Typography. It sits at the South Campus of ArtCenter College of Design. And that little square shows you a footprint. We have a gallery. We have a letterpress workshop, a letterpress shop that's about 4,000 square feet, 3,000 cases of type. My background in typography is as a letterpress printer. I'm a typographer. I'm not a book arts person. And so we started the Hoffmitz Milken Center for Typography we're open now about 3.5 years. And it is in honor of Leah Hoffmitz, who is a letterform designer and typographer at ArtCenter, who passed away, and her husband happened to be a billionaire. And I said, oh, I think she deserves her name on a building. Well, be careful what you ask for. So we're very fortunate to be a very freestanding center, and because we're freestanding, we can create programs and partnerships with several programs outside of ArtCenter. Our programming involves educational workshops, it involves exhibitions, symposia, lecture series, visiting artists. We have a visiting typographer program and a visiting artist program. So FEMINAE was originally part of Vox Pop, which was a dialogue and symposia in LA and in London. So that's the context of where FEMINAE came from. I wanted to do something that was really about women and by women, not just it was very difficult. So I thought this was a great opportunity to talk about the power of typography and design in changing or affecting opinions. So let's begin with what I think is a seminal point in the legal subordination of one sex to another is wrong in itself. And now one of the chief hindrances to human improvement, and that it ought to be replaced by a system of perfectly equal, admitting no power and privilege on the one side nor disability on the other. This is a very famous quote from The Subjection of Women by John Stuart Mill, written in 1869. So the idea of FEMINAE was to do let's not go back to 1869, but let's talk about the same issues, social, political, and economic issues that women continue to struggle with and have been repeatedly addressed over the last 150 years. So our Typographic Voices of Women by Women is basically posters that were curated from the Center for the Study of Political Graphics in Los Angeles. And it gave us an opportunity to examine the work of several women artists and art collectives that address these issues. So the work spans international, cross-cultural, and socioeconomic borders. The subject matter of the work varied and shifted with the urgency of the message and the opportunities for the voices to be heard. Some of the work stems from personal opinion and personal experiences, while others are inspired by experiences that are more universally shared by all women. So the exhibition, and we have a catalog, by the way. If you wish to buy it, you have some here, and the proceeds tonight goes to TDC. We present a visual history of those critical social issues. In the catalog, there are essays written by several of the artists. So what I decided to do, and I think what's most important is to think of categories that I think being a woman has to deal with. Men deal with the same issues, but I think as a woman, we're constantly, as you can see from 1914, whether it's, we need the right to vote, 1940s, women demand equal pay, and then 1960s, again, protesting against war became very important. So the first issue is solidarity. How do women address solidarity as women? Because being a woman does not mean we're all the same. And we'll have that larger discussion later. I've invited someone to have a dialogue with me, I think we're generationally different. And so how do we have a dialogue about being a woman? How does it change from generation, from 150 years ago to today? So this is a curated show. So it's a show that a lot of the pieces were well designed typographically and visually. Many of the posters or many of the artists are unknown in the show. They might be a part of women collectives because the adage anonymous was a woman is complicated by the fact that many political artists work anonymously, either to protect their lives, as you will see, their jobs, or simply to prioritize the cause that they're talking about. So I divided the show into categories. And the first category is solidarity. You know, how do we, as women, talk about the issue with each other and then to other people? So this show spans, I'd say, about 50 years, from maybe the late 60s up until contemporary. You'll see some contemporary pieces. This is Carole Wells. She says, and political posters grab our attention through the color and or graphics, making us read the text. Whether or not we agree with the message, it can provoke us into asking questions, and asking questions change us. So FEMINAE, as she said, demonstrated loudly and graphically that all issues are women issues. So we start with the concept of solidarity, and solidarity from an international point of view. When we say we celebrate women's struggles, we celebrate people's victories. The mountain is only so high on the left. Wait, your left. Our capacity is without limit. The stars move. Our will be unshakable. That was an inscription from the walls of women's prisons in South Vietnam when it was liberated in April 1975. So long as women are not free, the people are not free. Again, these are issues that deal with solidarity. This came from United Kingdom, 1978. Everything varies, whether it's offset, silkscreen. More contemporary was the We Celebrate Women's Struggles. The So Long as Women Are Not Free, People Are Not Free. That's, again, two colors, technology. It's silkscreen. Then we talk about what I think is interesting, the Women's Graphics Collective, which is a women's liberation union, which I actually think that they were very powerful in the early 1970s. Again, international women's solidarity. We all know that March is considered, we'll talk about, International Women's History Month. So here we see the real beginning of International Women's History Month and Day. Again, some of it is very well graphically designed. Others, you can see a lot of hand-done lettering and typography. Again, both of these are from the Women's Graphic Collective. So we don't have a single artist's name, but it's a collective that did both of these. And they're both silkscreens. So it's amazing how, you can be very complicated in your use of color or very simple in your use of color. I also like the terminology sometimes. Women are not chicks. I mean, when we go back again, we go, sisterhood is an interesting term. Women are not chicks. Again, 1972, Women's Art Collective. Sometimes we don't judge these from a design point of view, but from a messaging point of view. Does it get the message out there? That juxtaposed next to Pink. Does anyone know who did this? It's Sheila de Bretteville's piece. I knew you knew, Paul. I knew. This was 1974 when she had a lifelong, she has a lifelong interest in communal forms of art. I almost went to Yale when she first became head of the graduate program there, but I was also at ArtCenter at the same time, just starting my graduate work there. And it took me a lot not to transfer back to go back to Yale, because I said, I just moved from the East Coast. Why do I want to go back there? It was because of Sheila de Bretteville. So in 1973, she created Pink, which is a broadside meant to explore the notions of gender as associated with color. This was done for AIGA, and it was the only entry about the color pink. By the way, it's my least favorite color, so I found that was interesting. She arranged the squares to form a paper quilt from which posters were printed and, disseminated through Los Angeles. She was referred to then by the nickname Pinky. And here's a close-up of all the different opinions that she got about the color pink. Again, when we talk about solidarity, we talk about how do we perform as women, or how do we interact with each other. So International Women's Day, March 8th. It's a strange day, and where did it come from? This is offset. This was done in Eugene, Oregon. It celebrated May 8th, and it came out of the International Socialist Women's Conference movement. And it was suggested after women gained suffrage, the right to vote in Russia, in 1917, a few years before we had the right to vote in the United States, that March 8th became a national holiday there. Okay. Since then, it's been adopted by several nations that March 8th is a national holiday. Now, some people take it as a public holiday, and you get the day off. Hasn't quite happened here yet. Some places it's a day of protest. In others, it's a day that celebrates womanhood. Next category that I think women have become truly affected by in the last 50 years would be war. I would say before the Vietnam War, the protesting of war from the point of view of how it affects women was not necessarily upfront as it was during the Vietnam War, because women were, auxiliary to war. When the Vietnam War came, I think women were far more involved. So war became a rallying point for women saying, we are not going to support this. We're not going to let our children go to war. We're not going to let our husbands go to war. So I picked this interesting Lolita Lebrun poster by La Raza Silkscreen Center in San Francisco, 1978. So I never knew this. Lolita Braun, she was a pro-Puerto Rico liberator, and she led an armed assault in 1954 on the House of Representatives, and she actually wounded 5 members of Congress. Be interesting to see that happen today. All of a sudden, your protest goes violent. I mean, we see it go violent, but then this is 1954. She was convicted of attempted murder, and President Carter granted her clemency in 1979. So this is a wonderful poster that was designed for her, about her life. And the quote says, "We are all small, only our homeland is great." And it's in prison because she was pro-liberation of Puerto Rico from the United States. This is probably I find this to be the most moving poster that I forgot about because it's so quiet from the Vietnam War. It's a wonderful photo by John Schneider from the New York Times. It is silk-screened and probably the most expensive poster in the entire show. I'll tell you how much it was insured for. I was shocked. But it's quiet. It's a quiet piece about how war affects women, that all women are really affected by war, whether it's a Vietnamese woman, it could be you, this woman could be any of us. As opposed to what we had in the United States, again, we're looking, the Vietnamese photo was done in 1970. This was probably one of the seminal 1967 rallying posters, "Water is not healthy for children and other living things," done by Lorraine Schneider. another mother for peace in Beverly Hills. So you can see that the voices of women varied as I think the war developed too, the Vietnam War.
Was the poster on the right?
What?
The poster on the right was done in the U.S., wasn't it?
Yes. They were all done in the U.S. This was done by the Collective Graphics Workshop. Lillian Porter did this one. This woman is Vietnamese. Was done in New York City, actually. If the poster was done outside of the States, I'll let you know. We'll get to some more international posters. Again, when we talked about initially, women being anonymous, I think it was much more important for women to be anonymous outside of the United States because your political voice meant you could be punished for it. Here in the United States, we are, I don't want to say lucky, but I think we're less likely to be punished. If we have a voice outside of the United States, you're more likely to be punished for it. This is an interesting poster, Day of Unacceptance. It was an again, it put everything together. It marched against it was against Nixon. It was against, for the Vietnamese, 7-point peace plan, and the Day of Unacceptance, actually the April 22nd coalition, Jane Norling did this, became Earth Day. So this was done in 1972 in San Francisco. And since then, and again, it was completely hand written. It's not typographically set on a computer, but I think it gets its voice across rather effectively. Again, it's not what is the best design, what is the most effective design. And then, of course, how can we forget Sister Corita Kent? Silkscreen, Los Angeles, California, 1967. Again, her Stop the Bombing, a combination of what I would say sophisticated use of typography with immediate use of handwriting. Then we move into the changing role of women and the protest that came from it. Now women were moving from war protesters to soldiers. So this was done by the Guerrilla Girls, New York, 1991. Again, it's again the messaging. Why should she risk her life for governments that enslave women? But I also like this. This is, make out, not war. Their Code Pink is a grassroots organization that uses satire and humor, and some people are shaking a head, and color to get their point across. One is, again, they're very different graphically, they're very different typographically, and their voices, though, are still the same voice, but just approached from two different perspectives. We cannot have a show about FEMINAE without talking about the body. I like that crowd picture. Anytime that I was able to get a photo of, a royalty-free photo, they usually were crowd photos, protest photos. So for every woman who is tired of being a sex object, there is a man who must worry about his potency. People have to realize, whatever happens, it's going to affect all genders, all races, all religions. I thought that was a very interesting quote. So, again, these were done in the United States. Trans people are people. That was done by Rachel Curry recently in 2017 in Los Angeles. This was a letterpress printer I know. And the Syracuse Cultural Workers, Laura Newbern, Every Girl, Every Boy, to talk about, women are tired of acting like women, or how should we act? Again, some of these collectives took a little bit of research, because if it said a collective, some of the collectives were men, and I was really adamant about making sure the piece was attributed to a woman. Body dysmorphia. We cannot have a show about women if we don't understand the concept of body dysmorphia. Did you know that 75 to 80% of American women have a distorted perception of their own bodies, seeing themselves fatter than they really are? So body dysmorphia, we're not going to get into where it develops from, but it's an issue that women deal with, I think, more than men. And I have to say that when my funder of the center saw this, a man, he really didn't get this. He looked at this imagery and he said, I don't understand. Why is that an issue? And I think about 5 women around him were like, yes, it's an issue. And he was like, okay, I'm sorry I asked almost. But I think it's something that women deal with a lot more than what men deal with. So this particular issue about body, dysmorphia is more a woman's issue than everyone's issue. I could be wrong, but just from my dealings with it. So seeing fat, Los Angeles, California, and the Beautifully Slim was done in Australia. So it, now, in Richmond, Australia, silk screen. It's a beautiful silk screen. So I think the largest, though, and perhaps the longest battle that we deal with as women is a woman's right to choose. And the laws that are constantly restricting the rights. I thought this Barbara Kruger, Your Body is a Battleground, offset, printed, New York, 1989. I thought, oh my God, someone's gonna take this out of the show. I'll walk into the gallery, even with the monitors and securities, and someone's gonna nab this poster. Most of the posters you see here, they're standard sizes, not smaller than 18 by 24. This is, like a 30 by 24. Again, Barbara Kruger, uses her art, uses language as her art. And what I was so happy that we were able to get from the Center for the Study of Political Graphics is to get the German version of it too. And I thought, I've got to watch these. These are going to go. Nope, we're very lucky. I was very, 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 very careful in curating the show not to say, I'm pro this or I'm pro that. I think we have to be careful. I might have a personal opinion about a subject matter, but it's my opinion. What we were trying to show that it's a personal decision, not a legal debate. What we managed to show or not show was we're pro this, we're pro that. We are pro personal choice and personal decision. Not one is wrong and not one is right. So I thought that was an important component, especially when you talk about rights or abortion issues. Those are hot issues. Those are very difficult subject matters to present as an institution. So I was very careful to say, someone could look at this and go, oh, it's anti-abortion. No. If you look at it, it's about who has the right to choose, who has the right to tell you. So it's really a more political discussion rather than a personal or a religious or an ethical discussion. And again, this was the piece that really said it. Who is free to choose? Who is beyond the law? Who is healed? Who is housed? Who speaks? Who is silenced? This is another Barbara Kruger piece. Again, it really summed up the area of choice, and I think that was important. Another very interesting area is violence. Many women and children are trapped between violence and homelessness. When women flee domestic abuse, they are often forced to leave their homes with nowhere else to turn. This came from the American Civil Liberties Union Foundation. In the catalog, there are essays. Each section has an essay that has usually a personal essay, whether it's an artist or it's a personal experience. And I think that's really important to understand that there's personal experience that went with the exhibition. So 1/4 of all violent crime in the U.S. is wife assault. So violence against women is a major issue. You don't have to take it. This was done in Australia. This is contemporary Australian, 1992. You don't have to, Julie Shields, Red Planet, Community Art and Design Show. I mean, again, it's trying to give women the sense that you don't have to take this. Then we move into areas, though, that women are far more affected than by men. And I think it's a contemporary issue today. I didn't want to put anything in here about today's issues, about immigration, about fleeing violence, but these are very, very important, both two important incidents that happened. The one on We Want Them Alive, Los Queremos Vivas, was done in Mexico. And that had to do with the lack of response to violence against women in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, in the 1990s and 200s. And during these decades, somewhere between 200 and 400 women were abducted and murdered. It was called femicides. Were given an inadequate police and government response, even as the numbers increased. So again, when our perspective about women and violence is a U.S. perspective, and you have to look outside of the U.S., okay? This was done in You Cannot Bury the Truth, designed in Poland. And again, it was a response by a call from the artist Francisco Toledo for an original poster art in response to the 2014 abduction and disappearance of 23 students. Remember that? In Teachers College. They had over 700 entries. And this was displayed in the Museum of Tolerance in Mexico City. So I think when we think of violence, we're really unaware of the violence internationally against women. Again, in the United States, 1/4 of all violence, domestic violence. When you think about outside of the United States, then you really start to think about a large number of violence that are not just domestic violence, but femicides, you might call them. So, again, torture in Chile. This has to do with testimonies by tortured South American women. And Stop Sacrificing Women for Oil. Again, Feminist Minority Foundation. You talk about women in the Middle East who are sacrificed for oil. Actually, this was done in 1998, and Feminist Majority Foundation became the publisher of Ms. Magazine in 2001, founded by, of course, Gloria Steinem in 1972. So they took it over. Moving on. Black women will not be intimidated. This was done in London, 1977. So when you think about Black Lives Matters here today, this was an issue, an international issue, women and color, and not in the United States. And police brutality. That everyone thinks that this is, very central to the United States. This is Ontario, Canada. So Black Lives Matter, 2015, Ontario, Canada. Again, immigration. Who is affected most in immigration and detention? Women. I mean, you have to realize that a lot of the immigration and a lot of women are, again, because of violence, trying to get into the United States. And also women in prison. Something that people just don't think about, that there's a huge number of women who are in prison. I know, don't get depressed. Okay. Inequality. We'll talk about this. So, the other section, and there are many, many more pictures. I didn't want to repeat the catalog here because we can be here for hours and we don't want to be here for hours. Inequality, I think, is a huge issue for women. And we can even talk about that today, how we are treated or how you allow yourself to be treated. For every woman who is denied meaningful employment or equal pay, there is a man who must bear full financial responsibility for another human being. Again, let's go back to John Stuart Mills. You want economic prosperity and equity, you've got to think about, is subjugation going to get it for you, or is involvement? and equality going to help with the economics of any city. I love this. This is like, I'm sorry. Common Threads Artist Group, 1995, Los Angeles. Guess who pockets the difference? Oh, I love that. And very famous Chicago women's labor history, Red Pepper Posters, 1976, San Francisco. Wonderfully done. This was one of my favorites, Women's Action Coalition in Los Angeles, 1993. Equal work, equal pay. We know that today. It still goes on in Hollywood, right? She got $3 million, he got $6 million. And then this I love, Wendy Murray in Canberra, Australia. She wrote the essay about this piece in the catalog. I'm not antisocial, I'm just employed and broke. It's a beautiful piece. It's about 30 by 40 inches, silk screened. And she talks about a contemporary, how it is in a contemporary way that she's not getting equal pay, and how do you subsist? Again, when you talk about international, how labor drives the world economy, and I really like this because it is about, again, how women are, again, not compensated on a worldwide level at the same level as men. This is Oakland, California, 2008, and support equal citizenship rights. This is Los Angeles. She talked about in Africa. Again, she wrote the essay in the catalog about how this came about, why equal citizen, just having the right to vote. There are countries where women still do not have the right to vote. So if you don't have the right to vote, then you have no say in any economic or social issues. So just by having support equal citizenship rights is the first step to have the right to vote, okay? And now finally, my favorite area. Do women have to be naked to get into the Met Museum? So, I love the Guerrilla Girls. I don't love them necessarily for their design, but I do love how they follow an issue. So this is 1989. Less than 5% of the artists in the modern art section in the Met Museum. By the way, I hate their logo, their new brand logo. I canceled my membership, which I had since I was 18 years old, and a patron member. And they call me, and, oh, you're not going to renew? And I go, no. And I go, why? And I go, because the lettering is awful. And they go, what? And I go, talk to your marketing people. So beyond that, art sections are women, but 85% of the nudes are female. Well, of course, I hate to say it, I don't know which I like drawing the best. My undergraduate degree is fine art and art history. And I studied with one of the best. I studied with Philip Pearlstein, and if anyone knows who he is, one of the finest American figurative painters. So I can draw a body. I can paint a body, male, female. I'm not quite sure which one I liked better, male or female, male or female. So this is 1989. What was that, Paul?
Gorilla mask or not?
No gorilla mask. Now let's move on to 2004. Oh my, it slipped. Now less than 3% of the artists in the modern art section are women, but 83% of the nudes are female. Okay, we slipped. Here we are, we're rising again. 2011, less than 4% of the artists in the modern art sections are women, but 76% of the nudes are female. Now, either did they remove art or did they add more nude men? I'm not the one to go in and look. But again, these are large institutions, little children are going to, adults are going to, and it's not, then you don't have the Guerilla Girl posters in the entryway going, here. But do you actually think how many artists are women being represented by large museums or large collections? So that's important in terms of the support of women. We won't even get into the Bauhaus. Don't worry, Paul, I'm not going to go there. Not going to go to the Bauhaus. But I thought it would be really interesting to end on this because, you know, it's the larger picture. It's the institutional picture of how institutions view women, whether it's museums or it's educational institutions or financial institutions. It's, again, the percentage, you know, how women, what is the percentage of women within the larger institutional structures? And all women's issues are everyone's issues. We just have to remember that. And thank you. The dialogue continues. Thank you, CSPG. And if you want to, this is where you can go and look and find. But thank you. I appreciate it. And so I thought it would be really interesting, now that there's so few of you here too, you could ask about CPSG, but I'd like to introduce Meryl. Two women. I hate to say it, two different generations. And I met Meryl, and Meryl is, you know, we can sit too on chairs. I thought it'd be interesting, and I want everyone to ask questions and join the conversation, because my perspective on FEMINAE and women and design and art and typography is of a different viewpoint, I think, a different experience, perhaps, right? Wouldn't you say so?
I would agree.
Yeah. This is ephemera, and this is one of the biggest issues, and maybe you have opinions too. Meryl and I were saying, you know, does it matter to make a poster anymore? Sorry about that, Carole. No, but does it? When you are talking about an issue, whether it's a women's issue or a political issue, do we have to physically make a poster anymore?
Well, it was an interesting sort of conversation that we had actually before everyone showed up, and it was a discussion more along the line of what's happened with social media, sort of instant gratification and pushing out content, and really our lack of like substance and really memory in that world. You know, we take in information at such a fast pace on Instagram, and we're constantly scrolling through it. Whereas a poster really has this legitimacy to it, right? You put it on the wall and you have a moment with it, and it's physical, and you can, you know, see the lines from where the ink is drawn on the paper, and people collect them and really archive them. And
there's a poster museum.
There's a poster museum, yeah. There's some fine women here who are part of the poster museum, and they're putting together a massive collection of all the International Day women's posters. I'm really looking forward to seeing. But yeah, archiving in a physical form versus in a digital form is something that I'm interested in this conversation, because, you know, I have two worlds of that, right? I have documented images across the world, and have
Meryl has traveled a lot, and she has an interesting story. I want her. You have to tell the story. I've traveled a lot, you know, across many different places in the world, and you meet many different types of women, and you see, you know, will a poster help you, or will social media help you? But it's just a great story. You dressed as a Hasidic woman in Israel, and then as an Islamic woman,
as a Muslim
woman.
I walked across Israel to Jordan.
And
And after I got through 6 hours of border questioning, I dressed as a Muslim woman and got on a bus alone and went through the Arabian desert. And it was this really interesting experience. I mean, I was abroad for 3 years, and really bravery sort of just kind of, I kept developing myself in that world. So doing this at the time wasn't scary. I realize it is now, talking about it and speaking with people, but yeah, going in both of those worlds was really fascinating, because in the Hasidic community, I was obviously looked down upon for being a woman, right? I had a 35 millimeter camera around my neck, and it was a red flag immediately on the Shabbat. Whereas when I was traveling through Jordan, the women sort of looked at me as sort of like, what are you doing here? Why would you, what is you're not married, where are you from? So those contrasting cultures were so interesting to me, moving from Israel to Palestine.
But I think the point is, we look at, International Women's Day, we look at all these issues. Where's the best dialogue going to happen at this point? Whether it's in Asia or in Africa, South America, is it still important? I mean, we were talking about like the Me Too movement. I noticed I didn't have anything in here unless it came from the Center for the Study of Political Graphics, by the way.
Yeah.
That was fabulous. I mean, what a fabulous resource if you don't know them. 90,000 posters. And it's a teeny little place. I'm doing another talk in Pennsylvania, and my speaking engagement fee is going to them. I don't want it, but they can certainly use it. But what is the best way that, if you have an issue now, whether you're in Israel or you're in Jordan, is there a way for women to have a voice? Is it social media, perhaps? I see you shaking your head. Is it safer in social media?
Well, social media is really funny. I mean, you think about the Me Too movement is a hashtag, right? You could potentially, like a married guy sent me a message that I met. He got my number and he told me he was married, and I was really put off by it. You were flirting with me, and now you're telling me that you're married. Yeah, and he's like he's a man of high power, and I had this big conversation with all my friends about it. It's like in a text message, you can respond in really 3 ways. You can tell the person to get out of here, screw off. You could write them back and make it some really big thing where you're the problem in the world. This is wrong. You have a wife. Maybe you have children, whatever. You can just ignore them. And speaking with my friends, one of them said back to me, they're like, #MeToo. I was like, what? I just write back #MeToo? And it occurred to me, I was like, that's so interesting. I mean, that movement has made its way into, social media, text messaging. You could say that to somebody, who is, bothering you at a coffee shop. Just Me Too. Walk away.
And I think is it owned by women or is it owned by men? Or everyone, Me Too, #MeToo? I think it's owned by a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, more so. I don't know this solution, but I think the whole concept of having visual voice has always been important.
Yeah.
And most of these were not meant to be housed in a museum or in a collective. They're ephemera. They're supposed to be put up on walls and carried somewhere. And the fact that certain things survive, I'm really impressed that we have it to survive. And we were talking about this. The problem with digital protest is it's digital. Yeah. It can be gone. The cloud could be gone. You could be gone. Your message could be gone. What's so nice about political posters or protest posters 100 years from now, there could be a record somewhere about this.
But on the flip side, what's difficult about a poster is it's not available to everybody, right? Once it's in its digital form, you can blast it out on an Instagram story and people have it immediately. I can send it over to my friends who are, in the Middle East or in Asia or in Europe. And, the moment they wake up, it's right in front of them.
I kind of agree. We have the show, have the catalog. You can take the catalog. If you didn't see the show, you have the catalog, and then you have follow-up. But, we also offer, if someone wanted the PDF of the catalog, I have no problem if they wanted to read it. In fact, we have at the HMCT, we did a book on the history of typography and letter forms. And instead of physically making the book, we decided, why don't we do a hyperlink PDF book so that someone in, Indiana who teaches the Typography 1 class who says, I want my students to read this section, they can go read it. Plus we can update it. As links go away. you know, it's different today. I guess people want to see, you know, or interact with a message more than just be passive.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing about posters, something, you know, unless you physically are hugging it sometimes. Or,
Well,
I was in Mexico City last week and I was speaking with a printmaker, and they were telling me they're actually not able to travel to the U.S. They were supposed to come for a show to talk about poster work, and they were not part of this political group, but they printed posters for them, and that got them put on a travel ban list.
no.
Just the printmaking, just the act of that political printmaking. So I think, like, the point, whether it's digital or physical or anything, these things have power. And then, and whatever you have access to, some people have access to Wi-Fi, some people have access to a letterpress. All of these things
Right.
are about the power of the message.
Right.
So I think the medium is less important, it's about access and message.
that's a really good point. I mean, certain parts of the world, like China and Turkey,
You
you
don't have
can't
access.
access to Wikipedia. You can't access.
Yeah.
You need to literally have something that says that you're another part of the world. You know,
That's
you
true.
get a VPN, and then all of a sudden
Yeah.
you have access to somebody else's voice, or a voice that's not necessarily accepted in the.
Yeah.
And in certain parts of the world, all you do have is just materials.
Yeah, he was in a village and that's what he had, and our government deems it still powerful.
How did the government find out about that?
He was like put on some protester list, and he was like,
See-
it was really amazing.
See,
All
probably
they did
he's
was
in a
that.
village and
Yeah.
someone came along and took a photo and then posted it. And
Yeah.
the next thing you know, he's on a no-fly list, right, or not access list. I'm so far still able to travel.
You live here now, Gloria.
Although, no, I have an interesting story because you travel, and it's a little bit far from this. About 2 years ago, my passport had expired. You know, it's good for 10 years now or something like that. And pre the Syrian war, I visited, of course, Jordan and Syria and Lebanon. So I had these nice stamps on my passport. So I needed my passport renewed, and when they changed it over that you needed 6 months, at least 6 months, not 3 months on your passport. It used to be 3 months, but then they made it 6 months. Now I don't even know what it is. And I had to leave in like 10 days. And oh my God. So I did this really like fast to this visa company in Washington, D.C., get me my new passport. And I've used them for dozens of years, And I send my passport, and I'm sitting there. And they call me and go, we don't know what's taken so long. We just thought, turn around a day, blah, blah, blah. Nothing. So they said, what's, and I said, well, in my passport, there's a few stamps that at the time, quite neutral. Now, of course, it wasn't neutral. So I'm thinking, I was being investigated. Like, why is she visiting, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, nah, that can't be. Probably some person's just having a bad day eating a tuna fish sandwich and stuck it on my paperwork, you know. That's all. But you're right. You have to say, is your voice, you know, even as an institution, I have to say, and I talked about it, about the, you know, abortion, you know, the concept of body. As an institution, not me personally, as a personal artist, I have the right to say whatever I want to say. You know? As an institution, right, which represents many, I don't have the right, and this was very interesting. We have a show that's opening up. Do I have the right to have a specific opinion about someone? When we had our Vox Pop Voices, Protest, Power, and Persuasion, and protest, I had some very radical people talking. I had Robbie Canal, it's one of my panelists. And if you know Robbie Canal, he's an artist who uses image and type and words, he uses language to protest. And he does not hold back. He is quite left of left of left. And it was extremely controversial and made people nervous because there are people who have different voices or different opinions. And I think that's okay. It's okay to have a discussion. That's the whole point, is to have the discussion, not disruption. Yeah. To have different voices, to be harmonic about things, to say, okay, we're different. I speak a different language. That's why we have a new show up on multi-script languages. We have different languages, and we might have different philosophies. But the whole idea through design and typography is to create the discussion.
I think one of the things that's really interesting going on right now, to your point, is, again, back to social media, because that's the generation, I was the last generation to be in, in its analog form, but it's a sense of self for people, and I think that that's a real good thing, and then I also think it's a difficult one. Aziz Ansari wrote a book, Modern Romance, that actually is of interest to me, because there was a lot of studies that were done, in elderly communities now about, what people are comfortable with. And anybody below the age of 30 is very uncomfortable picking up the phone and calling somebody. But if you think about how comfortable that they are with scrolling and with having their identity kept on their phone with their Instagram handle or their Facebook handle, whereas coming out into the world and speaking, maybe in, a form like this, or having a larger conversation at a dinner table when phones aren't out, is more of a struggle. And you think about what a poster is. Poster really is a moment for somebody who maybe isn't the most extroverted personality to be able to express themselves in a physical form. Whereas I think Instagram and social media is as well. They're just, I see them in similar forms in that way.
Well,
right?
I think the larger difference is personal versus universal.
Is it though? You can have a public profile. You can.
Well, right. We talked about this earlier. You can have a public profile about me.
Yeah.
But some of the issues that one presents here is a universal issue, not about. It could be anyone could say, I don't want the government to decide for me what I should do with my life. That crosses over, whereas, oh look, here's what I ate this morning. You know what I mean? It's like, that's not an issue to me. Okay, if you're a vegan and you like to eat your avocado toast, that's interesting. That's
a problem on
Facebook. Branding yourself as me too is very different. I think what we have to do a shift is this: people who are very comfortable with, like you said, 30 and under. I don't know if they know. Can you embrace a larger issue if it's not about your personal world?
Yeah.
Because these issues.
But I think, speaking on that sense, I'm sorry. There are more and more Instagram pages that just relate to a specific topic.
Yeah.
Women empowerment, and not necessarily being self-branded, but as a topic itself.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I think my main question with social media versus a poster or a physical medium is the noise that we get from the message. So let's say if I were to scroll through Instagram through 5 or 10 different profiles about feminine empowerment, will the message still be as powerful as if I were to encounter a poster, let's say in a museum like yours?
Yeah. For me, in the past few months, I've gotten off of social media, I've gotten off of online dating, I've gotten off of all that stuff because it's just this infinite vortex of sameness, right? Nothing's sticking for me anymore. Yeah. Whereas if I go to a museum, where if I, Vicky, one of our studio interns, she and I came up to the Type Directors Club and looked through hundreds of pages of type specimens referencing 1960s typography for a fashion brand we're doing. And that to me is I was taught that so early when I was used to assist Carole at the Type Directors Club and work for people like Matteo at Muka. That was taught to me. That for Vicky, who's a recent grad at Parsons, was she hadn't learned that yet. It was Pinterest and it was scrolling, it was finding a space like that. Whereas, they have thousands of followers and likes. But what does it do for your soul and your body and your heart when you go up to a poster or you can smell a type specimen from, that long ago? To me, that's it.
Well, I don't know. I think it depends on the field you're in. Where if we have a visual art, a designer, a typographer, touching original to me is far more. It's the same thing with. I love both. I love all media.
Yeah.
I love digital. I love analog. Those of you who know me, I'm a letterpress printer. I have no emotional attachment to anything that's printed out of a digital printer. Zero emotion.
Really?
Nothing.
Come on.
Nothing.
I'm sure you do.
Nothing.
I
sorry.
disagree. I
Nothing.
think I know you well enough.
Nothing.
You
I
did.
don't look at something. I could print something out of a beautiful digital printer, and I'm like, okay, it's a print. I don't have an emotional reaction. But when I
Cat memes?
But when I like the cat, but when I create something, like I am not a calligrapher like Paul, but I'm a printer. When I touch metal, when I print, when I put something together, I have, I'm not saying it's good or it's better. It's just an emotional reaction I have.
What about,
I don't have an emotional
what about
reaction.
digital movement? What about the movement of type?
No.
I mean, really?
No, I don't get emotional about it. I have a distance to it. I love it.
There's such amazing
And I've seen
stuff in
some beautiful, beautiful transmedia type work. It's fabulous. It moves, and I think it's great. But I'm just saying, I have a visual reaction to it, and maybe a more kind of analytical reaction to it. But I'm not having an emotional reaction to that. Perhaps in theater, I've seen some interesting performance with type, like she's taken here like this group called Dumb Type. And I've seen it, and it's a great interaction with dancers and hugely loud music.
Yeah.
And projected typography. And I think that's because it's physical, there's dance and there's sound and there's motion. But I don't look at motion, the type in motion, and go, oh, that's really nice. No, I like it. I like it from an analytical point of view. That's just me personally. I'm just not. If it's not a physical reference to me, I'm talking about an emotional reaction, not an analytical. I can look at something and go, oh, wow.
I'm gonna start.
What about like Jenny Holzer, like LED screen?
I love Jenny Holzer.
That's a good
But
example.
Jenny Holzer, but that is not, maybe I'm not looking at, I love her work, and I love the work that she had a beautiful work at the Tate Modern this last year. And I love Jenny Holzer. If I had to pick someone who I would love to be my artist in residence to have a talk, Jenny Holzer is fabulous. But her work is emotional because it's environmental. You know what I mean? She is very specific when she does her work and she uses her language. Also, the content is interesting.
I'm thinking right now about some of
I'm not talking about fine art versus motion and cinema and things like that. I appreciate really, really well done typographic motion work. But Jenny Holzer is different because hers starts with the message rather than with what's it going to look like. She ends with what's it going to look like because it's usually specific to an environment. Did you see her work out at the Tate? Wasn't that fabulous?
I'm thinking right now about Paula Scher, because I think Paula Scher is somebody who really captures that. I can't believe we haven't had her quote come up. Words have meaning, type has spirit, because I feel that can transcend from print to digital to.
But I think you guys are like showing that this is a false dichotomy. Like some people digital like super resonates. Some people like digital scrolling through something, a kid, that's all they have access to. That's gonna change their life. That's gonna set them free in this moment. Some people it's like getting stunned by a poster. Right. Or to some people it's all of those things.
And I'm not and like I say, I love Paula Scher. I'm not saying that what she does is not interesting and not graphically interesting as a designer, but I'm just saying I don't emotionally respond. I respond to her work as a and that's generational maybe.
Love big type, I cannot lie.
So do I. That's my phrase. I love big type, and I actually did a little postcard that said, "I love big type, and I cannot lie." See, we are similar. So there is a similarity here, but maybe it's a question of what our experiences are, what we find.
Paul says make it bigger.
Make it bigger. I love big type, and I cannot lie. No, it's good, but I'm just saying I'm not. It's contextually, again, I put it in a different place, Paula's work. I so appreciate the work, but I'm not, it doesn't, like Jenny Holzer will carry me emotionally to a different place. It really will. that Vietnamese woman poster, by the way, that was the most expensive poster, and I had no idea it was worth $25,000. And it's like this big.
Oh.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh yeah, no one's going to bother that thing. You know, as it's hanging, because we were very worried about security. Although we had security, we had cameras. You never know when we have a public space, in a sense, that people come in and you try to hope that people are respectful. And I thought for sure the Barbara Kruger would be like, whoosh, I'm going to take that off the wall, or, you know. No, it was, and that would be, but nothing. We're so happy, and then this is our 3rd year. We've had no incidents whatsoever. And I think it has to do with the way work, again, is presented. When you present work as, this is something that is worthy of presenting, and that has to go back to the Met, to the museum, the Guerilla. Oh, I love this backdrop. That has to go back to the Met, to the museum. You know, the institutions have an obligation, I think, whether or not they do it, but to look at what they're presenting. And this is where we get into the discussion about what is your obligation, what is my obligation. I think it's very important. I think it was my obligation when I speak, bless you, when I started the Typography Center. You know, being an administrator is, bless you, is like the 3rd down my list of what I'd like to do. Number 1 is a teacher, artist. So I made it very specific that I must remain in the classroom, at least, 2 classes a year, because I think it's important, and this is just personally as a woman, that I am an instructor as a woman, because I think I bring to the classroom an example that's different than a male instructor, to whoever, and we talked about this, to the men who are in the room, to the girls who are in the room. There's a difference, and you have to accept the responsibility of who you are.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. So being an administrator is one thing, but I refuse to leave the classroom. I said, my more important work is done in the classroom or as an artist, and enabling. I'm an enabler. I enable them. But I think enabler can be a good word. And I think as women, if you enable other women in a good way, and men, it doesn't make a difference if the issue, or if you have a set of standards, right or wrong, yours can be different than mine. But I truly believe in that. If your truism, your authenticity to yourself, or your standards, or your beliefs, is how you should live your life, whether we agree or not. My funder is a very conservative Republican. But we have a dialogue, because I'm not a conservative Republican. Everyone knows that. No, you don't know that. But the whole concept is dialogue. And I think that's why I like doing the talks, because it's okay for someone to say, I disagree with you. I'm not going to cut your head off, say you disagree with me. Not here, but maybe outside I'll beat you up. No. But anyway, so is there any more questions or comments that people might have? No? Thank you. Then we should have a drink.
Yes.